Welcome back, guys, to the never-ending slop vortex of Overwatch content. No, seriously, I'd like to quickly apologize to everyone on my channel who watches things other than Overwatch being drowned in it recently. I'm just very into the game, more so now than I already am before, and I was already into it a concerning amount before. Speaking seriously though, this video, as you can see, is about Winston's perks, which might seem like a pretty small subject for an entire video, but since this is the first video on what I plan to make into a series, I'm going to take this opportunity to yap a bit at the beginning, talk about why I've even started this series, and lay some of the groundwork we might use in some future videos. So let me quickly start with that. Why am I making this video series? Well, to tell you the truth, my initial plan was just that I was going to do a patch review for this season as usual. But this season has had so much to talk about in it that, without leaving anything out, the shortest I could get my thoughts was over 3 hours, which is maybe a bit much. And to be fair, the meat of most of what I had to say was all wrapped up in the perk changes this season. While I still had plenty to say about the new support, and of course the new characters in Stadium, a lot of it was about nitty-gritty things, specific mechanics they add, and if I don't talk about those things, then all I really have to say is, they cool fun additions, I'm happy. But honestly, there's so many perk changes this season, it feels like I'd have to lay so much groundwork just to even begin. And to be honest, this reminded me of what happened when Season 15 first dropped and perks were first released. I wanted to do a video on it, but it was such a huge topic I didn't even know where to start. So I think I'm a little overdue to, well, start on this topic. I obviously can't cover every perk in the game in one single video. What I can do is maybe go one at a time. What I plan to do in these videos is obviously I'm going to look at the perk sets for each character in each video. For anyone who's out of the loop, I will explain what the perks do, and of course, I'll tell you which one I think is better in which situations. That being said, we also are going to go a bit further. If I feel like there's anything interesting to say about the design of the perks and whether I think they are well designed or poorly designed, I'm going to throw my 2 cents in. And beyond that, we're not just going to cover the perks that are currently in the game, I am going to go back and talk about previous perks that have been removed. Of course, considering the fact that perks have only been in the game for 3 seasons, there aren't that many removed perks already. However, there are still quite a handful, so there's already a decent amount to talk about. While obviously the perks that used to exist in the game but don't anymore aren't going to be relevant to which one is the best to pick now. Like I said, these videos aren't just going to discuss which perks are strongest, but which ones I also think are healthy for the game. And sometimes it's going to warrant me bringing up perks that used to exist that were arguably healthier or less healthy for the character. Besides, some of you might just be interested to hear about these perks you didn't even know were in the game for like a month before they disappeared. With all that said, before we can dive into Winston's perks specifically, I'd also just like to cover a bit of how the format of these videos is going to work. One of the first things I'd like to cover is the fact that obviously, while I try to spread my playtime relatively evenly between everyone in this game, I'm gonna have my favorites. Again, one of the big reasons why I love making videos like these, and I feel like I have a lot to say, is while I'm not one of the best players to ever touch this game or anything, I am someone who, for one, always approached this game strategy first, less so about aim mechanics, and so while that does bias me towards more strategic characters, quote-unquote, and less aim-based characters, it also means that I can kind of look at the game plans of every character in the game and understand them quite quickly and easily, even characters I maybe don't play as much. Beyond that though, it's also because I am a jack of all trades, and I feel like that's actually kind of rare in this game. I don't know, I always could be wrong, but it does seem like whenever I check anyone's profile, if it's public, it seems like the average player plays like 6, maybe 7 characters a decent amount, and everyone else they basically never touch. That is a lot of the roster that the average Overwatch player just has literally no perspective on. And I'll admit, maybe it's presumptuous of me, but I feel like that's why I can give some good takes on this game. Because of the fact that the average player literally doesn't know how 3/4 of the characters in the game really feel to play. Whereas I feel like I've got a pretty solid understanding of how basically everyone plays. I do want to lay out my biases though going into these videos, just so I can be as fair as physically possible. To start, I have a bias towards dive characters. This is pretty obvious when you look at my most played characters. My top 4 most played in order are Anna, Wrecking Ball, Brigitte, and Winston. It's pretty clear where my favorites are. You also might notice those are all tanks and supports, because at this point I have an almost even split between support and tank playtime. I have slightly more hours in support, but if I'm completely honest, that might be more a thing of the fact that I used to be a solo support main early in my time in Overwatch. In recent years, it might actually be true that I've got a few more hours in tank than support, but either way, I feel comfortable on just about every tank in the game, and the same goes for support. Obviously, that only raises the question of DPS, which I still play a decent amount. It's just, it took a long time before I was comfortable moving to DPS, since I always knew my mechanics were the rustiest part of my skill set. I still have hundreds of hours in DPS, and I play a large variety of the DPS characters. But probably the main thing I would confess to is the fact that I am definitely far more comfortable on flex DPS than main DPS. For those of you who are unaware, this isn't a video explaining the difference, but just very quickly, in short, if your character doesn't really have to use abilities to get kills, you're a main DPS. If you're a Hanzo or a Cass or a Widowmaker or an Ashe, you could just land shots and get kills. You don't really have to use abilities. But if you're playing someone like a Genji, a Venture, maybe a Symmetra, that's a flex DPS, because they are going to be far more reliant on using their cooldowns to actually get kills than just their weapons. So that's the main part where I put my hands up. I do feel a lot less comfortable when you put me on main DPS over flex DPS. Other than that, any other biases I may have are more character dependent, so it just makes more sense to cover them when I get to the specific characters. Speaking of which, I'm going to let you in on how confident I feel on certain characters before I talk about them. And I'm going to be as honest as I can. So whenever I start talking about a character in one of these videos, I'm going to put them into one of a few categories. There are the soft mains, the characters that I am the most confident on. I don't really want to call them mains, because like, again, I don't really main anyone, I guess, by the strict definition. But if I was placed into a situation where it kind of seemed like I had no idea what I would even want to pick, I would probably fall back on one of these characters I'm the most confident on. Speaking of confident, that's the name of the next category. Confident. These are characters that I still feel I am very good at. That being said, in particularly weird or really rough matchups for the characters, I might sometimes have moments where I'm kind of not sure if what I'm doing is right or not. But only on rare occasions when I'm really put in some of the toughest situations that character can face. I don't really have that issue with soft mains. But with the confident characters, while most of the time I'm going to have a cool head, there's going to be some moments where I'm a bit like, wait, what the hell is my character supposed to do here? At least when they're pushed to their limits. Next up is the comfortable category. I actually want to explain this one just a little bit more, because this might be something relatively specific to the way I play the game. You see, part of the reason why I'm a jack of all trades is honestly, I don't really care too much who I have to play. I just want to play what works best with the team most of the time. So if you're a bit skeptical that I could feel so confident on so many characters, if I'm completely honest with you, that's because there's a lot of characters that will probably fit into this category, comfortable, where when I play them, I feel like I'm very good at them. However, the reason why I feel that way probably isn't because I'm better than people who one-trick the character or anything. It's probably because I only play the character in situations where they're really good. For that reason, while I still don't think that cancels out the fact that I'm comfortable on the character, I know what I'm doing on them, and I know how to abuse their strengths, it does mean that I don't have access to that specialist knowledge, where if I was forced to play them in a really rough matchup, I would still know what to do on them. Sigma's actually a great example of this. Sometimes I feel like I absolutely dominate on Sigma, but I'm only ever picking Sigma with teams and maps where Sigma is obviously the pick. If you forced me to pick Sigma on Brawl maps versus Symmetra Ram, I would probably get run over. I probably wouldn't know how to play the matchup, and I probably wouldn't feel as confident on Sigma anymore. But of course, in those situations, I would just play a different tank usually. So whenever I have these characters where I feel like I'm pretty strong on them, but deep down, if I'm honest with myself, it's probably only because I played them when they're already good, I put them in the comfortable category. Now, most of the roster for me is at least at that comfortable level. However, there are a couple characters that will fall below it. Below that, we got inconsistent. I'm not sure if I'd call myself outright bad at these characters, because I have definitely popped off on them multiple times. It's more that sometimes I don't know why I am so feast or famine on these characters. Sometimes I don't know why I can walk into a game on these characters, dominate like crazy, get an ego, think I know what I'm doing on this character now, and then the very next game I am playing my mind off and I still can't even get a single kill, and I don't know what the hell happened. This is the category where most of the main DPS are going to lie for me, but even a couple other characters outside of that category I do think fall into inconsistent. And lastly, the simplest category, bad. Yeah, do I need to explain? This is the category for characters I'm bad at. Like Widowmaker.
But it just wouldn't be a Double Chin Doge 7 video if I didn't have to edit in an extra bit in post because I forgot to mention something and then I had to record it at like 6 AM. So, hey, that's what's going on here. No, but seriously, all I really forgot to mention was the fact that the whole point of this section was basically to say that the reason that Winston is the first character I was covering is because of the fact that I would say he is the character I am the most confident on. Although it does give me an excuse to tack on the disclaimer that I am very aware that I probably am not selling that to you very well in the gameplay footage in the background. I'll be honest with you, I am not at my best in some of this gameplay footage. But I just wanted to get this video done, damn it. I wasn't gonna go farming for like peak Winton games. When I play Winston, I have to do a lot of predicting both what my allies and what my enemies will do just based on the characters they're playing and this way that they're playing the game right now. And oftentimes I don't have time to look back and check what they're actually doing. And so when I'm playing normal games at my normal sort of MMR, that is not really an issue. I'm pretty consistent with being able to predict what people are going to do without having to actively watch them. But when a new season happens and a new rank reset happens that makes it so you get lots of surprisingly low or high ranked players in your games, it can really throw me off. Yeah, even the good side of it, even sometimes having unusually high-ranked teammates on my team still can lead to them sometimes making plays I don't expect out of my usual teammates, and even though that's obviously a good thing, it kind of confuses me and sometimes leads to me being in the wrong place at the wrong time because I'm not expecting my teammates to do the things they do. All of this potentially just being a massive cope for the fact that whenever there's a new season or a rank reset, it tends to throw off my game sense a little, because I feel like for at least a little bit I have a much tougher time getting a read on what the hell everyone in the lobby is doing, and I kind of rely on that information a lot to do my job on Winston. That being said, I still feel like Winston is my most confident character. In fairness, there isn't really a hard statistic to back that up. If you're talking my most played character, I mentioned it's Anna. If you're talking my highest win rate character of all time, it's Venture at 64% all-time win rate. And even if you're talking most played tank, it would be Wrecking Ball. But for one, a lot of that Wrecking Ball play time is from earlier in Overwatch 2. Ever since about Season 10, while I still play Wrecking Ball, I kind of prefer to play Winston because of the many frustrations that are involved with dealing with Wrecking Ball, and the fact that most of the things I like about Wrecking Ball are things you can also do on Winston without all the frustration that comes with playing Wrecking Ball. As well as that, while Winston isn't my highest win rate tank, he is among my highest, with a 60% all-time win rate. And while there are a couple tanks that have a higher win rate, namely Malga and Junker Queen, both at 61, Malga and Junker Queen are also characters I only tend to pick in situations where they're already going to be good. Whereas Winston is one of the few examples of a tank that I do sometimes willingly pick even into situations where I know he's not going to be an easy, effective pick, just because I'm so comfortable in the character and I like him. And also partially because I kind of want to learn how to play against his counters. That naturally is going to drive down his win rate a bit, so the fact that despite that it's still at 60% I think is a good sign. Either way, that's why Winston is usually my most confident pick and why I wanted to make him the first one in this series. With all that said, back to where we were.
Lastly, I just want to make something clear about perk decisions. Unless I really think a certain perk choice is just brain dead obvious, I'm not going to be hitting you with the, yeah, just take this perk every time. It feels like most of these videos sort of frame it like they have to do that. They have to tell you which perk is the auto take it every time. But I'm going to be real with you, I really don't think there are that many perk decisions that are that simple. The vast majority of them instead, to me, fall into a dichotomy where usually there is a generic pick and a situational pick. The generic pick tends to be the more popular one, of course, and the situational pick is technically stronger, but only in the right context. I'm always going to try and explain what that context is so that you know when you're picking the more situational pick, and you know when you're picking the more generic pick. I really do think the vast majority of perk decisions are like this. There are almost no perk decisions I consider to be true 50-50s, but there are a lot of 60-40s or 70-30s. And even a lot of them where I literally think the less popular option is just straight up stronger. It's just that the strength it provides is more situational. That being said, I believe we are finally ready. I know, a lot of preamble, but I wanted to get it all done in this first video, especially because, to be honest, I don't have as much to say about Winston's perks. You see, the thing about Winston's perks is he is Winton. And the thing about Winton is that he is very basic and yet perfect. And the thing about a character that's designed like that, to have an extremely basic but effective, honest, balanced kit that's very skill expressive and fun, is as good as that is, it makes it really hard to change it. Like, there's such little there to work with, and it's so delicately balanced that it's really difficult to look at Winston and go, okay, what do we do here, man? In fact, there's actually a little bit of a weird tendency for the most well-designed and honest characters in the game to usually actually have some of the worst perk sets. And the complete opposite is true as well, that not always, but generally, some of the most hated, absolutely cancerous characters in the game actually get some really cool, fun, well-designed perks because there's so much work you can do with the character design there to make it better. For that reason, I honestly don't think I'm going to have too much to say about Winston's perks. But of course, I guess let's start with his minor perks, which has always been the most scuffed decision. Let's start with a minor perk that has now been removed from the game in the most recent season. Short Circuit used to be a minor perk which gave you a 50% damage boost versus deployables as Winston. I actually don't mind this conceptually as a minor perk, I just don't know why they gave it to Winston. I feel like Winston is one of the last characters who should be breaking turrets and things like that. Typically that's way more the purview of projectile DPS. So while I don't mind a deployable destroying perk existing, I feel like this is just the wrong character to put it on. As a result, it was very unpopular and very weak. Don't get me wrong, a 50% damage boost is a lot, and one thing the perk doesn't let on is that barriers count towards deployables. So you do get a massive damage boost versus barriers as Winston by taking this perk. And of course, if you are dealing with like, I don't know, Torb, Alari, Sigma, yeah, go ahead and take the perk. 50% faster shield break, 50% faster kill time on turret, 50% faster kill time on Alari pylon. That's a pretty big deal. But like, I'm gonna be real with you, if it's just like one Torb and the rest of the team has no deployables or shields, then like, it often wasn't worth it to really pick this perk. You really needed multiple buildables to worry about, or at least barriers, for this perk to be worthwhile in my opinion. Which made it so that back when it did exist, I felt like it was something you only took like 10% of the time at best. That perk has been replaced now by the new minor perk added just days ago, Barrier Toss. It's just what it sounds like. Instead of dropping your bubble when you hit it on Winston, he instead throws it forwards. However, I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit disappointed. This throw is pathetic. And to be honest, even if it wasn't, just the concept of Barrier Toss is a little confusing. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's fun and quirky, but like, okay, what do you do with that? I know that the obvious answer might be you throw it to allies that need bubble to protect them without you having to be there with them. But I'm just gonna be real with you, I think in most situations it's just better to leap on top of them and bubble rather than have to take this perk so you can throw your bubble. Because you're gonna have way more situations on Winston where you need to bubble yourself than bubble allies. Because you're a dive tank, you're the one who takes all the attention and aggro. So while there are going to be some situations where you're going to want to protect your teammates, most of the time you're going to be the one most in need of protection on your entire team. It's not even a selfishness thing, although in fairness, there is something to be said about selfishness being smart sometimes in Overwatch. Of course, no one's going to have a better idea of what care you need than you, but all this just seems irrelevant considering that the barrier toss distance is just so short it can't even really be used to peel for other people. So what's the point of barrier toss? Well, I was thinking it might be intended to be some way to sort of more consistently block sleep darts and anti-nades from an Ana that might be stopping you when you try and jump in, but I don't even really think it achieves that either. However, I've used it for a bit now, and I think it's finally starting to click. Now, I want to make it very clear, I still think this perk is very weak, but I think it's mostly just the fact that, for one, it does throw it a little bit further if you use it mid-leap rather than using it on the ground, and two, once you know that, you realize that you could have situations where when you land, instead of landing in the center of the bubble or on the front of the bubble, you're landing on the outer edge of the bubble and you're still in the bubble if you walk forward. What this basically means is that you get a teeny, tiny, minuscule little 2 steps of extra space whenever you leap in. And I'm not gonna lie, the temptation here is to say, are you serious? We're taking an entire minor perk just so that we can take 2 more steps forward when we leap in without exploding. But in fairness, this is Winston we're talking about. Winston is a character where the smallest of little boosts can be taken to pretty crazy heights when people who know how to abuse them get their hands on them. In theory, taking just a teeny percentage or 2 more extra space with every leap plus bubble combo might actually have more impact than I'm giving it credit for. But certainly, it's got some tight competition. The other minor perk has remained unchanged since launch, and that is Heavy Landing. Heavy Landing makes it so that during Primal Rage, your leap damage gets a charge meter, where the longer you spend in the air, the more it amps the damage of your leap up to 75% bonus damage. That sounds insane at first. However, it's not quite as crazy as it sounds because of the fact that the amount of time it takes to get a max damage leap is so long that it's actually kind of a dumb idea to actually go for it. Remember that in Primal Rage, you have a leap every 2 seconds, and it seems that you need like 4 seconds-ish of airtime to get the full 75 damage boost. You miss out on a lot of mobility from your ultimate if you want that extra damage, and on top of that, just quite frankly, that's not really how you use Primal Rage. You don't typically go all the way into the sky and start boom on top of people. Usually you use Primal Rage to go insanely deep, doing lots of short but really wide leaps that cover a lot of distance. You don't so much go for these really tall leaps that don't really go very far. Now that being said, I might be making it sound like this perk sucks, but despite these drawbacks, it is still considered to be the auto-pick perk for Winston ever since its release. And that is because, quite frankly, Winston can do a lot with a little. Even a tiny little damage boost for Winston is a much bigger deal than most other characters. So even the ability to just get 5 or 10% extra leap damage every now and then when using your ultimate is enough for it to be considered the better perk, even if the way you use it rarely leads to you actually getting charge on it. It's really hard for Winston to hit his breakpoints, so just a teensy bit of extra damage here and there adds up pretty fast, especially when you gotta leap every 2 seconds. For that reason, it probably doesn't surprise you that I consider this to be an 80-20. In fact, it might even surprise you I'm even giving that much to Barrier Toss. I think that Heavy Landing is the default pick here. That being said, Barrier Toss is a niche pick that is worth taking in some contexts. I think Barrier Toss is going to be more useful in maps with long sightlines and lots of open space. I also think there are just some team comps and maps where, as Winston, sometimes it just doesn't make sense to try and use Primal Rage to kill and it's just not going to work. For example, versus Lifeweaver in particular, with all the health regeneration he brings to the table, if you're trying to jump backline and kill them with Primal, you're probably not getting what you want. That doesn't mean Primal is useless, it means you more use it for mobility, being able to go super deep with your dives, deeper than you'd usually be able to get away with, and use it to make space. When you find those matchups where, quite frankly, even with a bit of an extra damage boost, you're probably not killing with Primal Rage, it could just be worthwhile to take Barrier Toss. Part of me kind of grinds my teeth having to say that, knowing that I still find Barrier Toss so underwhelming for an idea that had so much potential, but I think I also have to acknowledge the fact that Heavy Landing is a minor perk that provides you a minor benefit only when you're using your ultimate. And while the minor benefit of Barrier Toss might also be disappointing, it's at least something that is kind of permanent, not so much a small boost in power in 1 or 2 moments in the entire duration of the game. As for the major perks, first up we got Chain Lightning, which allows you to deal chain damage whenever you zap someone with your right click. Anyone standing within 6 meters of the person you shot receive 50% of the damage as a chain lightning zap. Now, as cool as this perk is, to be honest, when it was first introduced, I was massively disappointed. I kind of expected this was going to become a perk. If you didn't know, this was something that was shown off years ago as a PvE ability for Winston, and it was clear it was going to be reused somehow, and it only made sense for it to be reused here. That I didn't mind so much, but what I was asking is why the hell is this not a minor perk? I mean, you gotta remember, Winston's right click at full charge only deals 60 damage at most. That means every chain lightning zap is only 30 damage. That's literally less than a quick melee right now. That sounds pretty underwhelming for a major perk, especially considering you kill way faster with your normal left clicks anyway. I know that the point of right click is it isn't supposed to be super strong, it's just supposed to give you at least an option to use at range as Winston, and I'm completely fine with that. It's just, if we're already going by the logic that his right click isn't supposed to be very good, then why is a perk that minorly buffs it only in certain contexts being considered a major perk and not a minor perk? It just really didn't seem like a big buff to me. I couldn't ever see myself getting a kill purely because I took Chain Lightning. And to be fair, I was kind of right there. Of course, I've used loads of Chain Lightning since then, and I have gotten 1 or 2 kills off of Chain Lightning, but even then, usually if I got a kill off of it, it was usually more down to the enemy's stupidity than me being smart with it. The real reason that Chain Lightning is actually a pretty good perk is because of the ultimate charge it provides you, both because the extra value it provides is damage, and damage provides twice as much ultimate charge as healing, which is what the alternate perk does, but also because while it isn't a lot of extra damage because it's only buffing your poke is also the only safe and consistent way you have to generate ultimate charge as Winston without committing to doing something that might get you killed. So it's also a particularly valuable area to amplify your ult charge in, especially considering then once you get your ultimate, it kind of gives you permission to play as risky as you like and be able to bail yourself out of just about anything with Primal. You might have noticed, but I had to re-record this section as well because I made the little mistake that I actually genuinely never realized there is a cap to the amount of people Chain Lightning can bounce to. I know that probably sounds stupid because it says it right there on the perk description and it's not very long, but we knew that Chain Lightning was going to be a mechanic in the game eventually for so long that when it finally came out, I'm going to be real with you, I don't think I ever actually read the description even once because, like, I already knew what it did.
you know? So I'm having a little bit of a Mandela effect moment right now, just looking at my video editor, seeing that, oh, it says right there, plain as day, it can only bounce to 2 additional targets at maximum, and I never knew that was a thing. Doesn't really change my opinion of the perk all too much, but that's why this had to be re-recorded, just so I didn't spread that misinformation. Either way, you're not usually going to get a chain to more than 2 other people anyway. And let's be frank, while I know we're dealing with small numbers, so in terms of kill power, once again, this isn't going to be a big deal. In terms of just pure farming ult charge, Chain Lightning versus the kind of teams where it's going to get value is quite literally a double multiplier to your damage output in the pre-fight, and therefore a double multiplier to your ult gain. That's a pretty big deal. I mean, even if you're only hitting 1 chain, it's still a 50% boost. That's pretty significant. Now, for the sake of this video, I tried every single perk combination in the footage you're seeing. But to be clear, if you're taking Chain Lightning, you're going to want to make doubly sure that you took Heavy Landing as well. It only makes sense to take the perk that buffs your ultimate when the other perk you're taking is a perk that's only really good for charging your ultimate. But yes, ultimately, I will put my hands up and confess, I very much underrated Chain Lightning. I'll be real with you, when it first came out, when perks first dropped, I think I literally had 1 game with it in all of Season 15. And it wasn't that I wasn't playing much Winston, I was playing a lot of Winston, but I kept having moments where I'm like, okay, is this the game where I finally pick Chain Lightning? And I see how the enemies are playing and I see what comp they have and I'm like, no, it doesn't seem good. I'm taking Regenerative Barrier, it just seems too important. And I think a lot of that came from the fact that I kind of overestimated how difficult it was going to be to get chain shots off consistently. Funnily enough, afterwards, once I finally realized this perk wasn't as bad as I thought, I started taking it all the time. Not even because I necessarily thought that it was the best to take it all the time, but just because I kind of feel like I had to make up for all the time I wasn't playing with it. And I must admit, I started to find the perk really fun once I gave it a shot. All that said, does that make it the better perk overall? Well... Regenerative Barrier is much easier to use and quite frankly to most people seems just stronger anyway. Regenerative Barrier makes it so that while you're inside your barrier, you regenerate 30 HP per second. Not an enormous amount, but your barrier does last quite a while, and so the total HP gain you can get for standing in barrier is quite a lot. Not to mention, you are a tank, and being able to heal yourself even in small amounts is pretty powerful. Especially considering you're a dive tank, which means you're particularly difficult to heal mid-fight. Now you have a way to heal yourself mid-fight. So, funny story. When Winston's perks first released, I already let on to the fact that I thought that Chain Lightning sucked, so I didn't use it. I used Regenerative Barrier instead. And to be fair, I knew deep down that this was the 0 skill free value one, and that Chain Lightning was arguably the one that took more skill. So part of me thought maybe I'm underrating Chain Lightning, but I just thought the amount of value this perk provided was way too much to turn down, even if it was the low skill free value one. Only then we start seeing perks being used in pro play, and of course every pro Winston is using Chain Lightning, and everyone's clamoring about how you just gotta be good, Chain Lightning's better, just stop being bad at the game. And I'm like, I don't know man, really? I really think that Chain Lightning just isn't that good. I know it's the more skillful one, but I think even if you hit your shots, it just ain't that great. And funnily, we kind of came full circle, because then all the pro Winstons realized that Regenerative Barrier, even though it takes less skill, is actually kind of better than Chain Lightning. And now, as far as I'm aware, up until this point, most pro Winstons are using Regenerative Barrier, even though it's the easier one to use. So that was a bit of a funny story. Either way, I don't actually want to sell you a narrative that actually Chain Lightning sucks and it's all Regenerative Barrier. To be fair, I think this is actually quite close. I really think this is like a 60-40, where the 60 does go to Regenerative Barrier, but you should not count Chain Lightning out. Chain Lightning is best used in the situation that the enemy team is playing extremely clumped. This not only makes it so you don't have good dive targets because everyone's grouped together, but it also makes it so that you basically need your ultimate to go for any good dive because of the amount of focus fire you're going to take. Chain Lightning kind of solves both of these problems, punishing the enemies for grouping up with the extra chain damage and kind of encourages them to split up so that you can dive isolated targets, and if they choose to stand there and tank it anyways, they get to feed you loads of ult charge which you can then use to force them to split. However, outside of the situation that you're trying to play Winston into a very brawly, very close quarters, very grouped up deathball-y kind of comp, yeah, I think basically the rest of the time you should take Regenerative Barrier. Maybe if your heals are really, really good, you might still want to take Chain Lightning, just because the heals aren't necessary. But even if you have good supports, most supports heal their dive tanks when they're out of the fight. In most cases, your supports are not going to be able to heal your dive tanks mid-fight when they're deep on an angle. Not to mention, while Restorative Barrier doesn't provide as much ult charge, it still does provide ult charge.
And while healing just yourself is not going to provide much, if you actually have a bunch of people fight in the bubble with you, you can actually farm a decent amount of ult charge by the AoE healing. Again, it's not going to be as good as Chain Lightning, but it honestly isn't bad. I think there's also the obvious elephant in the room as well, that if you're playing Winston on ladder, you're probably having to deal with a lot of teammates that do not make your job easy. Especially when you keep getting Mercy or Lari backlines on Winston, so you've got like the worst supports possible to support a dive, and you're getting like no heals. You're really going to need to heal yourself with that regenerative barrier. Either way though, I was pleasantly surprised when I really put in the time to learn how to use both of these perks, how close it was. Like I said, if you asked me about my opinion when perks first dropped, I would genuinely say that like regenerative barrier clears Chain Lightning as a throw pick. Whereas while I clearly still think this is the better perk, it's a lot closer now, as I say, 60-40 in my opinion. With that being said, those are my takes on Winston's perks. I know me talking about the perks probably wasn't even half of the video's length, but hey, I've got to trick you into watching the preamble somehow, just so you know what's going to be going on in these future videos anyway. No, but seriously, I plan to do more of these, and hopefully, considering it's a smaller topic at a time, I could put these out a little bit faster. With all that said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.